Hashtag SpeakEasy Podcast listeners. Can we have a conversation real quick? Like, bring your ear close to the phone or whatever listening device you may be using at this moment. Stronger leaders, stronger profits. Did you get a chill? Did you feel it? Did you feel like in your toes they started tingling, right? Listen, that's what this episode is going to be all about, because when we think about the idea of, listen, everybody wants a profit, but when it comes to good leadership, woo, that is a process. That is such a process. And it's one that we're going to break down in this episode today. So I'm super excited about my guest for today. Hello, Sean. How are you?
Hello. How are you doing? I'm doing awesome.
I am doing great. I am excited about this episode because leadership definitely looks different from what our parents and grandparents define leadership as. And so with that being said, before we jump into the topic, Sean, tell the studio audience a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So kind of a unique background, but I grew up with a single mom in a small town in Kansas and ended up going to the military academy at West Point, New York, and then was commissioned as an Army officer. And I was an officer in the Army for 10 years. The first 5, I was an infantry officer, this rifle platoon and scout and sniper platoon, served in Southwest Baghdad, and then went to selection and made it into Army Special Forces, got my Green Beret, and then commanded 2 different Special Forces detachments, including in Afghanistan and a couple other places in the Middle East. And, you know, everyone has things about their job, right, that they love and things they just kind of deal with, right? And I was never really the gun guy. I was never really even I love the camaraderie and team and mission, all that stuff. But for me, ever since I was little, my passion has always been people. It's always about leadership and about problem solving. Solving tough problems with groups of people is what I love doing. So I knew that I wanted to do that coming out of the military, but I didn't want to be the military officer commander that comes out and says, all right, business leaders, let me tell you what real leadership is, right? There's too many of them that come out and try to do that when they've never done it themselves, you know? So I thought, well, okay, what do I need to do to be able to provide value and coach and help and take what I know are invaluable leadership lessons. I've crammed a lot of living and a lot of leadership lessons into 14 years in my life, but I need to be able to speak the language and understand how to apply this in the civilian world. So two-prong attack, right? Two-prong mission here. Get a formal education in business. I got my MBA from UNC Chapel Hill, and then start your own company and get it self-sustainably profitable. And I figured if I do those 2 things, I will have done the selection process, the civilian world, and be able to provide value to leaders. And my first, you know, like I started off, got my MBA, and my first business failed. You know, I know your business is about overcoming, about struggles, and everybody has those. And I think it's important to have the right mentality when it comes to failure, but that was really hard. You know, I had always someone who really always won, you know, I'd always just worked harder. And I sort of try to apply the same lessons in business, right? In special forces in the military, sometimes it's like, if you're sucking, it's just, how do you get out of it? Just keep moving, just keep going. And eventually, right, the sun rises and the mission's over and you get to go home and everything's fine. But in the business world, the mission never ends. You never get to go home. You never redeploy. And so I ended up kind of grinding myself and having physical ailments, mental health issues, a bunch of other things, and had to kind of pick myself up, started a second company, and now it's a multi-million-dollar company. And so I hit my metrics, and I now launched Strong-Leadeship-Strong-Profit, where I try to share these lessons with the leaders and companies that are trying to really shift their culture from management to servant leadership.
That's so important. When we think about servant leadership, I think a lot of people think servant leadership means that I'm going to be broke. And in all actuality, servant leadership means that you will be broken in some ways, because some of those habits that we have to be broken. Some of the mindsets have to be broken. And so we'll be broken, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll have to be broken. So I love that your life has been an example, the definition of what that means. So with that being said, what would you say was the first thing that when you had the success in it, you really said, okay, that's what servant leadership looks like. I need to make sure people know about that part.
Oof. So, it's interesting because in the military, we use the term servant leadership. I also use the term whole person leadership. And in the military, especially, all my time was with small units on the ground, on the front. Like that's all I did. I was never in the back. I never had a desk. I was always on missions. And it's almost expected and inherent when we lead there in those environments that we lead the whole person. That, when you have a soldier, you're not just in charge of them when they show up to the office and while you're at range, and then they leave and now all of a sudden you're not in charge of them anymore, right? You're still their leader. How are you eating? How is your home life? How are you feeling? What are your goals? You're leading, you're actually leading in it, the whole person, not what are your KPIs? What are your metrics? How do your performance? How many bathroom breaks did you take? How much PTO do you have? Right. And in the civilian world, I think we're seeing that switch. And so it's hard for me to say this is the one time, but that is the mentality that I am trying to disrupt. And I think we're seeing, if with this pandemic and what COVID's done is sort of these workplace trends, the mental health trends, the mindset trends that were already occurring. We're already heading that way. And it just fast forward. It did 10 years of progress in 12 months. And companies are having a very hard time, and people are having a hard time in a lot of ways, adjusting to that fast of a change. And, we're starting to see with whether you call it the great resignation or the great reshuffle or whatever you want to call it, we're seeing that where the power has shifted. The expectations of what being a business leader, what people want and expect. And I think it's shifted. It's funny because people think it's shifted to almost the military set. Like we want someone to lead us. I want to have a leader in charge. I don't want a manager, right? I don't want someone to just keep track of my metrics, tell me when to show up, when not to, what my report should like. I want someone that's going to inspire me, that's going to train me, that's going to coach me, that's going to make me a better human and can communicate what value this organization is playing to the world. And that's going to get me going, right? Because at the end of the day, money is a satisfier, not a driver. And so it's not just about money. If you look at all the metrics of why people are leaving jobs, why they're leaving companies, the number one thing is poor leadership culture, burnout, overtraining. Every metric you look at that people complain is all defined under one umbrella for me. It's bad leadership. It's bad culture. It's bad leadership. And if you can shift that mentality to whole person servant leadership, and realize it starts with me. I can't just set the example. I have to live the example, and then really embrace and lead from a place of love and caring and humanity. The profit's going to come.
So you have my vote for presidency. In case you didn't know, because I've got one. Right. One of my favorite books is Extreme Ownership. And I did not, even though I have friends who were in the military, and I know what they experienced and who they were when they came back was not who they were when they left. Mm-hmm. Looking at it as the whole person leadership, I never even thought about it in that context.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest shift. I also, it's interesting. I spoke at a convention last year in Cleveland for a big commercial construction convention. And, they asked me to talk about how they could get more veterans, right? They wanted to recruit veterans into the workforce, and how do we get them? How do we talk about where we go find veterans? And I'm not sure if they really knew what they were asking, because, when I came back was like, look, I can tell you where they're at. Go to these bases, talk to these people. But here's what you have to know. It's like the expectation that these military service members have for your organization, for how you communicate, clarity, putting mission first, taking care of people, and leadership. You can recruit all day, but they're going to be out the back door if you don't meet their expectations of leadership. So the number one thing you need to do with your organization is make sure your organization is one of servant leadership, whole person leadership, and not one of management, and not one where it's just about, shut up and do your job, go home, work is work. Like that's gone now. No one, there's a lot of ways you can get a job in your 20s and make a lot more money than you do carrying a rifle and walking through the mud. There's a lot easier ways to make money. So everyone that joined didn't do it for the paycheck. I mean, that was, that's part of it, right? But there has to be another component. And that's what veterans are used to. And that's why so many of them struggle when they come back and they go to organizations where it's a bunch of individuals. There's no team. There's no leader. It's not about the mission. It's just about, no, I do my job. I come here. I move this paper from this here. I type on it. I put it over there. I give it to them. And that's my job. And I go home. That's all I'm responsible for. And it's like, well, what happens if you just take this and instead you give it to this other person first? Wouldn't that be better? Not my job. And you can't process that. That doesn't make sense to someone who's mission first. And so and people think that, I think some leaders, especially senior leaders, they don't think people that matters because, I think in previous generations, it was just about you go to work, you do your job, you take care of your company, they'll take care of you, go home. But that's not the world we live in anymore. People want more. And what they want is they want purpose and they want mission. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And that's what leadership is about being able to communicate and give that to your organization. And when you do that, people run through a brick wall. People will work harder and they won't feel burnout because they love and believe in what they're doing. So you'll get more productivity. You'll get people that are engaged. You won't have turnover. You'll have people excited to come into work. You have people that will advocate for your brand when they're out having beers with their friends on Saturday. You can't believe what we're doing. We're doing this. We're going to change this. We're going to change the world. We're doing this for our people. Profit. If you put profit first, you're going to, that doesn't touch people's humanity. If you put purpose first, you touch their humanity, and business at the end of the day is a human business.
There's something to be said about the company that all their statements are my and I, as opposed to we.
Mm-hmm.
When the company is, we are doing this, we are going here, we are achieving this, this is what we are going to do. There is that inclusivity that really is important. And it's interesting because I worked retail for over 15 years, management and everything. And to get you in, it's we, but when you're in, it's I.
Exactly. And that's so backwards from, that's, to me, that's leadership 101, and, one thing that I found really interesting is, even at West Point, which is where I went to school, and a premier leadership institution in the world. Right. And it's tough to go. It's not a college experience, and in a traditional college experience, and they push you, but it's a leadership laboratory in an intense way that you can't do because you don't have the same control over, like a normal student body that you do. And one thing, and I see this with entrepreneurs I work with too, is one thing we do, it's a psychological, I forget the term for it, but the longer we know something, the less value we place on it. If you learned something 20 years ago, 10 years ago to you, you're like, wow, someone going to pay me for that? That's not even important. I don't even talk about it. But what I found is some of those leadership 101s, like that's like the first, it's like when I was 19 years old, right? When something good happens in the organization, it's we. When something bad happens in the organization, it's I. You take responsibility for the failures and you give the credit to your people. I learned that when I was 19, and you've got 50-year-old senior executives that can't figure this out. And so, and that's something that it took me years to realize, because I'm like, really? You guys don't already know that? Like you're a multimillionaire. You don't know that you don't do that. Like, it's like, I didn't even value and think like, well, of course everybody knows that, but it's the fundamentals, right? And that's what a master is, right? You're not a master of complexity. It's a master of the fundamentals, and the fundamentals of leadership come down to some of those, that mission first, that give credit to your people when something goes great. And then when it doesn't, you shoulder that responsibility. You see that with good coaches, you see that with good players in athletics. And you see it with, honestly, good companies. I mean, you see it with good companies, you see people that do that. And then you see the bad companies. And I think this just shifting, again, the sort of the meta business culture that we have, the expectation is shifting to that. And I think you have a lot of senior leaders that know that this shift is happening, but I don't think a lot of them know how to implement that cultural change. And I think that's what they're struggling with, is the how.
Yeah, I think the part of it is the struggle with the how, and if I change, what will that mean?
Mm-hmm.
what's going to be on the other side of that change? Is it going to be something that's going to make us successful, or is it going to be something that makes me look like a chump? Because, there's still that mindset that, if I lower myself, then what is that going to mean? How am I going to look? And so there's still that mentality as well.
It is. But to me, the first thing that screams, as soon as I see that, I'm like, oh, that's insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what it comes down to. It's insecurity. I mean, another thing I see when I work with companies is when, you'll see, well, how do we get our managers to our leaders to, train people for the next job, train them for their job? Because there's this mindset, well, if I train them everything I know, then they're going to take my job. It's this scarcity mindset. And number one, that's cancer. That person, I'll fire that person as soon as I hear it. I don't care what their numbers are. You're gone, because that is a cancer that's going to eat your company and your organization. But it comes from insecurity. It comes from poor leadership that they didn't have, right? Because, I use one example. So I remember this is years ago. I don't know if they still do this, but I read a statement by Elon Musk with Tesla, because they had just come out with new battery technology. They were leading it. And he said, and he took literally released to the public in his financial reports, about the company, all their battery technology. Right? He didn't go through a patent process, open source. Everybody can have it. You can go on the internet and find it. And they said, how most companies hide that, right? Like hide the technology, hide the whatever. He goes, because if you're always if you're just trying to look at what we did last year, like you're always going to be behind us. Like I trust my people that our stuff in a year is going to be better. And that's the mentality he has. And that's the reason he can put a rocket into space for 1/10 the cost that NASA can.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So you have to have the confidence. And what happens is these leaders haven't put in the work in self-leadership to be able to lead another person. And that's when I work with some executives, right? And I'm doing something with senior executives of the company. And I'll talk to them about their time management, or I'm looking at their calendar. Like, okay, how are things going? All right. Well, how's stuff at the home? Well, it's going okay. And then you start digging in deeper. Like, well, I'm looking at your calendar, and yeah, your workday is super scheduled, but where's this time with your kids? He's like, what? I'm like, you told me you have 3 kids. Where's your time on the calendar? Like, oh, when I get home, I just kind of, when I have time. Oh, when you have time. Well, previously, when I had you put out your top most important things in your life, you put your kids as the number one thing, but they don't even make it on your calendar. Like, so, I forget it was Zig Ziglar, right? He's got one of the quotes like, show me your calendar and your pocketbook, or you show me your bank account and your calendar. I'll tell you your priorities. And so I say that because people you can't lead whole people if you're not a whole person, if you don't learn how to lead yourself. And I think that's what scares them, because they know how to lead someone at work. They know how to get results in terms of just hitting KPIs, hitting metrics. But to lead a whole person, how is your relationship with your wife and kids? Do you need more time off? And all of a sudden they're like, well, actually my kids don't talk to me. My wife, I haven't seen her in a week and a half. She's out, but yet you're successful. Like that's not a success I want. And I think that's the thing, like this new like millennials and down, like that's not success to us. Having $50 million in a broken home, it doesn't sound successful to me. And so people need to lead and invest in themselves. And when you do that, then you see those leaders who do that first, who can reach out and show that for other people. And that's why I use the term live the example, not set the example, because set the example means in that moment in front of people, you do the right thing. But what about later? What about on Friday night at the hotel bar at the end of the convention? Are you doing the right thing? Because you're married, right? Or what are you doing? What are you doing there? It's all those are you going, do they see you in the hotel gym at the convention working out before the talk? What are you eating? How are you taking care of yourself? Right? That's whole person leadership. And it starts with you. And I think that's the part that scares people, because they haven't learned how to do it themselves. And so you've got to learn how to master yourself. How can you master and lead? How can you call yourself a leader of other humans when you can't lead yourself?
Ooh, Sean just lit up the mic, dropped it, picked it up, and dropped it again. That was fire. Guys, listen, leadership has definitely changed over the years, but it doesn't mean that we can't still be great leaders. It doesn't mean that we can't still exemplify what true leadership should look like. And even if you haven't seen or been in and experienced, what that leadership should look like, guess what? You have the opportunity to be that leader. That is so important. You have that opportunity. And so I love everything that you shared in this episode, Sean. Let the studio audience know how they can get in contact with you and how they can find you online as well.
Absolutely. So you can go to StrongerLeaders-StrongRProfits.com. It's got all my information. It's got all my stuff. My book, A Warrior's Mindset, The 6 Keys to Greatness, is on Amazon. To go pick that up. And, or, I'm on Instagram, Sean Patton Presents. Sean Patton Presents on Facebook and Sean Patton on LinkedIn. And so I'm easy to get a hold of. Please reach out. I like to serve both sides of this whole great reshuffle, great resignation, because if you are the type of person who are an entrepreneur or have your own company, I have a small group. I like to coach and help people that are chasing their dreams. But on the other hand, if you're part of an organization that says, we're losing all our good people, all entrepreneur people, all our motivated people, where are they going? That if you're struggling with that, it's because of leadership culture. That's what it is. And so when you're ready to shift your company from management to servant leadership as a culture, that's what I like to help with.
That's so important. I think right now we're in a time. Listen, can I just be honest? Okay, I'm not that old, you guys, so don't come for me. But I've never experienced a time where there was a major amount of jobs available and people were not going after them. People did not want to apply. And I mean, to the point where Wawa was handing out like a $500 bonus if you signed on with them. Companies are like giving you like a $50 bonus if you work for 3 months. I'm like, this is crazy that this is the time we're in. And people are just like, I've had enough. I don't want to be bothered.
Yeah. You can't throw money at it. Like I said, money, we said it earlier, money is a sustainer. It's not a driver. And so what you have to do is get people in their hearts and in their minds and show them how they motivate them and they want purpose. Right. And that's one thing we could do another episode on the book and the 6 keys to greatness, but right. Part of we talk about having a North Star, and everyone needs a North Star. They need a higher purpose. They need to feel fulfilled and content. And, people they don't want to go and feel empty and just put in their time with 8 to 10 hours a day. They want to feel a part of something bigger themselves, and fulfillment can't be selfish. Your North Star can't be about you. It's in our evolution. We're community people. There's a lot of wealthy, miserable people out there because they put it about them, and it's not about, like you said, the we. And I think that's what it comes down to, is you have to find an organization or make an organization that is about people and about bettering the world around us. And when you do that, the profit will flow.
I love it. Thank you so much again, Sean. Yeah, we definitely are going to have to do at least a part 2 to this.
I'd love to. I'd be honored.
I appreciate you being on as a guest today. SpeakEasy Podcast listeners, listen, I know that there were gems in this episode. So go ahead, press the pause, go back, write it down, listen, send it out, share it with another person that you think they're needing to kind of shift some things when it comes to leadership for their life, for their business. It's time. It is definitely time, and we have the opportunity and the resources to do so. With that being said, let us know how this episode resonated with you by leaving us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. And until next time, guys, don't forget to press it out. See ya.